For 8 straight years, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez dodged Ben Shapiro's debate challenges until 2026 forced her onto a stage where silence was no longer a shield. Ben Shapiro offered AOC $10,000 to debate him back in 2018. She called it catcalling and refused. He asked again in 2019. She ignored him. He asked in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. She ignored him every single time. Finally, in 2026, her 2028 presidential campaign team said yes. Because refusing a debate for 8 solid years is not a brand a presidential candidate can carry. She agreed to 1 hour, a neutral moderator, a live audience, no prepared statements, no attorneys, no committee staff, no 12 seconds of comfortable silence. And the man standing at the opposite podium had been preparing for this conversation for 8 years. Plus, he talks at 200 words per minute. She had survived Vance's data, Kennedy's quotes, Johnson's grades, and Trump's silence. But she had never faced a format where silence wasn't an option. In this format, she had to answer. And answering was the one thing 8 years of hearings had taught her not to do. Smash that like button, because you are about to watch the debate that took 8 years to happen and discover why she spent 8 years making sure it didn't. The stage was not a hearing room. No dais, no witness table, no gavel, no committee members elevated above the witness. No institutional architecture designed to make one person powerful and the other person answerable. Just 2 identical black podiums, 10 feet apart, on a stage at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. This forum had hosted debates between people who disagreed since before either of them was born. The moderator, a veteran journalist selected by mutual agreement after 3 weeks of negotiation, sat at a desk between the podiums. The live audience, 750 seats, sold out in 4 minutes, scalped for $2,000, filled the forum's tiered seating. Every network carried it live, and the internet carried it faster. 30 million people were watching before the moderator even finished her introduction. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez stood at the left podium in a dark blazer and white shirt, the outfit of a woman auditioning for president. Her posture was different from every hearing, standing, not sitting, hands free, not flat on a table, no attorney behind her, no staff passing notes, no committee procedure to hide inside. Just her, a microphone, and the man at the other podium who had been waiting for this moment since the 9th of August 2018. Ben Shapiro stood at the right podium, dark suit, no notes, no folder, no binder. Nothing on the podium except a glass of water he would not touch. His hands rested at his sides. He maintained that particular stillness of a man who doesn't need notes, because the notes are in his head, organized by topic, cross-referenced by date, and ready to be deployed at a speed that his opponents typically cannot match, and his audiences have learned to expect. AOC spoke first. The moderator had given each participant a 2-minute opening. Ben, I'm going to be honest with you. I agreed to this debate because I want the American people to see exactly what conservative media looks like in person. You've made a career out of talking fast, yelling at college students, and clipping the answers of people who aren't prepared. Let's see how you do with a congresswoman who's been doing this for 8 years. She paused, the campaign pause. The pause optimized for the clip that would travel. I'm not one of your college freshmen, and this isn't your podcast. The audience, specifically the progressive section, which occupied approximately half the seats, produced a sound, applause. The sound of people who had bought tickets hoping to watch their congresswoman dismantle a podcaster. Shapiro did not wait for the applause to finish. He did not wait for the moderator. He spoke at the speed he always spoke. Fast, precise, the speed of a man who has trained his mouth to keep pace with his mind and whose mind does not pause for applause. Congresswoman, in August 2018, I offered you $10,000 to have this conversation. You said, and I'm quoting your tweet, "Just like catcalling, I don't owe a response to unsolicited requests from men with bad intentions." You compared a policy debate to sexual harassment. He looked directly at her. You're here tonight, 8 years later. Either my 2018 offer wasn't catcalling after all, in which case you owe every woman who has actually been catcalled an apology for trivializing their experience. Or You've decided to respond to catcalling. Which is it? The question landed before AOC's applause had finished fading. The timing was deliberate. Shapiro had spoken into the applause, not after it, so that his question arrived while the room was still processing her attack. The progressive section of the audience, which had just been applauding, went completely quiet, not because the question was devastating, but because the question required an answer, and the answer required choosing between two options, and both options were bad. AOC's hands, the hands that had been free at her sides in the standing debate posture, the hands that were supposed to gesture, point, and conduct the room, the way she conducted hearing rooms moved. The right hand came up in the beginning of a gesture. The open palm extension she used when making a moral claim, it stopped midair. That hand had been trained by 5 hearings to be still, and the stillness training was now fighting the debate training, which required gesture. The hand hung at chest height for approximately 1 second, the exact duration of a body receiving contradictory instructions. Then it lowered to the podium where it gripped the edge. She gripped the podium. In 5 hearings across 4 months, AOC had never gripped anything. Her hands had gone flat, they had contracted, they had checked for a ring, they had reached for a phone. But they had never gripped, because gripping in a hearing room is visible desperation. In a debate, gripping the podium is normal. Everybody grips podiums. But gripping the podium 30 seconds into a debate, before the first policy question is even asked, is not normal. It is early. And early gripping is the body's way of saying, I need an anchor, and I need it now. Shapiro did not wait for a response to the catcalling question. He let it sit for 3 seconds, no more, because debate format does not allow the 1, 2, second silences of hearing rooms. Then he moved. Congresswoman, let's talk about the Green New Deal. Your signature proposal, introduced in February 2019, the most ambitious climate and economic proposal in American history. Estimated cost between $51 trillion and $93 trillion over 10 years, depending on the model. The American Action Forum, the Tax Foundation, the CBO, all land in that range. Let's just use the low-end $51 trillion. Federal revenue, all of it, every tax dollar collected by the United States government is approximately $4.4 trillion per year. Your proposal costs $51 trillion. That is approximately 11.6 times the entire annual revenue of the federal government. When you were asked on 60 Minutes how you would pay for it, you said the critics sound like Dr. Evil. He looked at her. Congresswoman, I'm not Dr. Evil. I'm a person with a calculator. And the calculator says 51 trillion minus 4.4 trillion per year leaves a massive gap of approximately $7 trillion per year that you haven't identified a source for. Where is the 7 trillion? AOC responded. She responded immediately because the format required it. Silence was not an option. A hearing room allows 12 seconds. A debate stage with a live audience and 30 million viewers allows approximately 2. The cost of the Green New Deal has to be weighed against the massive cost of inaction. Climate change will cost the global economy $23 trillion, but I didn't ask about inaction. I asked about the 7 trillion. The interruption was clean, not rude, just fast. Shapiro's voice arrived at the end of AOC's sentence, before the sentence had finished establishing its direction, the way a car merges into a lane before the lane's current occupant has cleared it. The merge was precise. The merge said, I know where your sentence is going, and I'm not going there. The cost of inaction is a different conversation, he continued. I'm asking about the cost of action, your proposal, $51 trillion. You are $7 trillion per year short. Give me a funding mechanism. AOC's hand shifted on the podium. The grip loosened, regripped, and loosened again. The unconscious rhythm of hands that are trying to find a position that feels like control, only to discover that the podium is not providing it. What if we taxed every billionaire in America at 100%? Took everything. Not a tax rate, but total confiscation. Every dollar. Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, all of them. How much do you raise? He answered his own question. $4.7 trillion. One time. Not per year, just once. Because after you take everything, they have nothing left to take. You've raised $4.7 trillion. and you need $7 trillion per year. Confiscating every billionaire's entire wealth pays for approximately 8 months of your proposal. Then the money is gone, the billionaires are broke, and the proposal is $6.3 trillion short. So ill, ask again, where is the money? AOC attempted the pivot, the exact pivot she had used in every hearing, the pivot to values. The question isn't about specific funding mechanisms. It's about whether we as a society, it's about specific funding mechanisms. You proposed a specific amount. $51 trillion is a specific number. Specific numbers require specific funding. You don't get to propose the largest expenditure in human history and then say it's about values. Values don't pay bills. Mechanisms pay bills. Give me a mechanism. AOC's response speed was declining. The first answer had been immediate. The second had a half-second delay. The third, the pivot to values, had a full second delay. Each delay was the body's processing time increasing as the available responses narrowed. In a hearing room, processing time is invisible. The witness sits, the room waits, the cameras absorb. In a debate, processing time is starkly visible. The audience sees the delay, hears the filler, and feels the gap between the question and the answer that isn't coming. Congresswoman, you've been in Congress for 8 years. In 8 years, you have not produced a funding mechanism for your signature proposal. Not a white paper, not a CBO score request, not a detailed plan. You proposed $51 trillion and offered a movie reference. And tonight, 8 years later, you still don't have an answer. The progressive section of the audience was silent, not hostile, just processing the math. The way you process math when someone does it right in front of you. And the numbers don't lie, but you really wish they did. Congresswoman, I want to try something. I'm going to ask you a series of yes or no questions. These are questions that a presidential candidate, which you are reportedly becoming, should be able to answer in one word. AOC's chin lifted, the debate chin, the chin of a woman who has been told she can't answer and is about to prove she can. Go ahead. Do you still support defunding the police? The chin held, but the answer did not arrive immediately. The answer was complicated. Because in 2020, she had supported defunding. In 2021, violent crime in her district had increased 22%. In 2022, she had quietly removed defund from her campaign website. And in 2023, she had reframed it as reimagine public safety. The word defund was now the exact word she most wanted to avoid saying, yet most needed to address. I support reallocating resources to community-based, yes or no? Do you support defunding the police, reducing police budgets, because that's what defund means, yes or no? It's not a yes or no, it is a yes or no question. You either support reducing police budgets or you don't. Presidents make yes or no decisions every day. The nuclear codes are yes or no. Sanctions are yes or no. Military deployment is yes or no. Can you answer a yes or no question? The audience produced a sound, not laughter, not applause. The hybrid sound of a room watching a binary question collide with a non-binary answer, and understanding that the non-binary answer is itself an answer. AOC's grip on the podium tightened. Both hands now. The double grip. The grip of a person holding a podium the exact way a person holds a railing on a ship in rough water. The grip was visible to the first 10 rows of the audience and to every camera in the room. Should private health insurance be abolished under Medicare for All? Yes or no? The goal is to transition. Yes or no? Under your Medicare for All proposal, do private insurance companies continue to exist? 180 million Americans have employer-sponsored insurance. Do they keep it? Yes or no? They would receive better, they would lose it. That's the actual answer. Under your proposal, private insurance is eliminated. 180 million Americans lose their current coverage. You can argue they get something better. That's a completely separate debate. But the answer to do they keep it is no, and you couldn't say it. He moved to the next question without pausing. The speed was the weapon, not the content. The speed. Each question arrived before the previous answer had settled, the way waves arrive before the previous wave has receded. And the cumulative effect was not individual damage, but erosion, the slow wearing away of a surface that was designed to appear smooth. Should ICE be abolished? Yes or no? Immigration enforcement should be, yes or no? Congresswoman, you tweeted abolish ICE on the 28th of June, 2018. That's a definitive yes. Has your position changed? Yes or no? Silence. 2 seconds. In a debate format, 2 seconds is an absolute eternity. The audience registered the pause the way audiences register missed notes in music. Instantly, instinctively, with a firm understanding that something that was supposed to be there is missing. My position has evolved from abolish ICE to it's complicated in 4 years. The exact same evolution you had on the Iron Dome, from strip the funding to present, to keep the funding, to strip the funding again. Senator Kennedy called you a weather vane. I'm starting to see why. AOC's posture changed. The standing debate posture, shoulders back, chin up, weight forward. The posture of a person advancing shifted. Her weight moved from the balls of her feet to her heels. The backward shift was incredibly small, perhaps half an inch. But the shift changed the body's center of gravity from forward attacking to back absorbing. The shift clearly said, the body is no longer advancing, the body is receiving. Congresswoman, how many bills have you sponsored that were signed into law? The question arrived the way all Shapiro questions arrived. At speed, without preamble, without the folksy stories, or the hometown memories, or the glasses-cleaning rituals of hearing room politicians. Just the question, delivered the way a fact is delivered, without apology. AOC knew the number. She had been asked the number in 4 hearings. She had sat through 1, 2 second silences over that exact number. But in those hearings, she could sit in silence and let the silence pass. In a debate, standing before a live audience, facing a man whose next question was already locked and loaded, silence was not a tool. Silence was a forfeit. Legislation isn't the only measure of impact. I have moved the Overton window on climate, on healthcare, on economic justice. The Overton window. You've moved a concept. Concepts don't feed people. Legislation feeds people. You're a legislator. The word literally comes from legislation. How many bills? I have introduced dozens of. Introduced, not passed. Introduced. I asked how many were signed into law. How many bills that you sponsored are currently enforceable federal law? The political environment. 0. The answer is 0. In 8 years, you have sponsored 0 bills signed into law. You've introduced the Green New Deal, a non-binding resolution that was never even voted on. You've introduced Medicare for All. It never reached the floor. You've proposed $125 trillion in new spending across your major platforms, and you've delivered 0 legislation. He looked at the audience, not at AOC, at the 750 people who had paid to be in this room. This is the most followed member of Congress. 13 million followers on X, 8 million on Instagram. The most clipped, most quoted, most screenshotted legislator in American history. And in 8 years of clips and quotes and screenshots and Instagram stories and fighting oligarchy tours and Munich security conference appearances and Met Gala dresses, the legislative output is 0. He looked back at AOC. Congresswoman, you are the most famous do-nothing in American political history. And I mean that not as a petty insult, but as a clinical diagnosis. Because the fame and the nothing are directly connected, you are famous because you don't legislate. You are famous because you generate content. And content and legislation are vastly different things. Content is a catchy clip that travels before the correction is made. Legislation is a hard law that exists long after the clip is forgotten. You clearly chose content. And 571,000 donors who blindly give you $16.81 a month genuinely think they're paying for legislation. The line most famous do nothing landed in the live audience, the way brutal lines land in debate audiences. With sound, not the quiet absorption of a hearing room, an eruption, gasps from the progressive section, laughter from the conservative section, and in the middle, the undecided section. The people who had come to be persuaded, the particular heavy silence of people processing a phrase that they know they will repeat at dinner tomorrow. AOC's body received the eruption the way a body receives a physical wave. the involuntary lean backward, the half-inch retreat of a person absorbing impact through their center of gravity. Her heels, which had already shifted backward in Chapter 3, pressed even harder into the stage floor. The retreat was cumulative now. Half an inch before, another half inch here. 1 inch in total. 1 inch of retreat on a debate stage is invisible to the upper gallery, but glaringly visible to the cameras, and strictly visible to the body itself, which knows that it is now farther from the microphone than it was 10 minutes ago and must now project harder just to be heard at the same volume. Shapiro's speed suddenly changed. It slowed, not dramatically, but by approximately 20%, from 200 words per minute down to 160. The deceleration was itself a massive signal. Every audience that had ever watched Shapiro knew that his hyperspeed was his default. When he slowed down, the slowing was the preamble. The slowing explicitly said, what comes next is not rapid fire. What comes next is the exact thing he came here to say. Congresswoman, I want to step back from the policies for a moment. I've asked you about the Green New Deal, about Medicare for all, about defunding the police, about your barren legislative record. But the question I've been wanting to ask for 8 years is not about any of those things. He looked at her. The look was not hostile, not contemptuous. It was curious. The genuine curiosity of a man who has spent 8 years trying to understand whether the person across from him actually believes what she says. Congresswoman, do you actually believe any of this? The question landed differently from every single question in the series. Kennedy's questions had been folksy, Vance's had been quiet, Johnson's had been pedagogical, Trump's had been confrontational. Shapiro's question was deeply intellectual. The specific question of a man who processes the world purely through logic and has found, after 8 years of analysis, a massive logical inconsistency that he simply cannot resolve without asking. Because you proposed $93 trillion in spending with zero funding mechanism. You proposed abolishing private insurance with zero transition plan. You proposed defunding the police and then quietly removed it from your website when crime spiked. You voted present on the Iron Dome right after calling present votes pure cowardice. You called my debate offer catcalling and then showed up 8 years later. The pattern is not conviction, Congresswoman. True conviction has a direction. Conviction stays put. Conviction costs something. The pattern is purely positioning. You just say whatever the specific audience in front of you requires. Green New Deal when climate is trending. Defund when BLM is trending. Moderate when the primary approaches. And the positions constantly change, not because the scientific evidence changes, but purely because the audience changes. You are undeniably the most talented communicator in Congress. I sincerely mean that. I've been studying you for 8 years. You are better on camera than anyone I've ever seen, better than Reagan, better than Obama. The magnetic way you hold a room, the way you look into a lens and make a person feel like you're talking directly to their soul, that is a massive gift, a real gift. But gifts can be used for two distinct things. They can be used to communicate truth, or they can be used to perform truth. And performance and truth are completely different things. Performance is a viral clip, truth is an enforced law. Performance gets 13 million followers. Truth gets 0 bills signed. So my final question, the exact question I've been asking since 2018, the question you cowardly called catcalling to avoid, is incredibly simple. Do you believe any of it? Do you believe in the Green New Deal? Really, mathematically, armed with a real funding mechanism and a concrete plan? Do you believe in abolishing ICE? Really, operationally, with a functional alternative system designed and ready to go? Do you believe in Medicare for all? Really, armed with a safe transition framework for 180 million displaced people? Or is it all just content? Is it purely the thing you say to the specific audience you're standing in front of? Is it just the flashy clip that travels globally before the correction can even be made? Because if you truly believe it, defend it right now. Give me the hard math. Give me the funding mechanism. Give me the transition plan. Just give me one specific answer to one specific question. In 8 years, I have not received a single one. Tonight, I'm asking one final time. And if you don't believe it, if it's all just content, if it's just a corporate brand, if it's purely the machine that generates the 16.81 donations, then tell America. because they deserve to know whether the most famous progressive in the country actually believes in progress or just believes in social media followers. Silence. In a debate format, the silence should not have been possible. Debate format strictly does not allow silence. Debate format violently demands a response. The moderator, the audience, the broadcast cameras, the 30 million people watching, all of them fully expect the person at the podium to speak, because speaking is literally what podiums are built for. But AOC did not speak for 8 seconds. 8 agonizing seconds in a format that barely allows 2. She stood at the podium in complete silence. The silence was not the composed, dignified silence of a hearing room, not the 1-2-second silence that hearing audiences had been conditioned to interpret as deep wisdom. This silence was starkly visible. The live audience could physically see it. They could see a prominent woman standing at a podium, holding a microphone, and completely failing to use it. They could clearly see the massive gap between a brutal question and an answer that was simply not arriving. And that massive gap, in a room full of people, under heavy studio lights, feeding straight to broadcast cameras, was the absolute loudest silence in the entire series. Not because it was mathematically longer. It wasn't. 8 seconds is shorter than Kennedy's 15. It was devastating because she was standing up. A person sitting silently at a witness table looks like a person deep in thought. A person standing silently at a debate podium looks like a person who has just been asked a brutal question in front of 750 people and 30 million viewers and realizes they do not have an answer. Her eyes did not dart to a camera. They did not dart to an exit sign. They did not dart to an empty chair. Her eyes locked onto the moderator, the neutral party, the exact person whose job it is to forcefully move the conversation forward when the machinery has stalled out. The eyes silently screamed, "Help," not dramatically, not desperately. It was the specific look of a person who is drowning at a depth that doesn't actually look like drowning. The terrifying kind of drowning that happens when the water is only chest high, but the undertow is far stronger than the swimmer. The moderator did not intervene. The moderator fully understood that the crushing silence was, itself, the answer. And moderators who understand that a void is an answer absolutely do not fill it. Shapiro waited the 8 seconds. He had been waiting 8 years. 8 more seconds meant nothing to him. That's exactly what I thought. He stepped back from his podium, not dramatically, just the subtle step of a man who has launched his question, received his verdict, and realizes he doesn't need to ask another. For 8 years, Congresswoman, I've been begging you to defend your ideas. You smeared it as catcalling. You smeared it as harassment. You called it everything except what it truly was, a simple request for a conversation. Well, tonight you finally had the conversation. And the answer to every single question I asked was exactly the same. Never an actual answer, just a pivot, a reframe. It's more complicated than yes or no excuse, a lazy reference to the Overton window. Literally anything except a specific factual response to a specific factual question. I honestly don't think you're a bad person, Congresswoman. I think you're an incredibly talented person who has tragically confused theatrical performance with executive governance. And that massive confusion has cost your voters 8 years of viral content and 0 years of actual legislation. Thank you for the debate. I've been waiting 8 years. It was completely worth the wait. He picked up his glass of water, the exact one he had not touched for the entire bloodbath. He took a single, slow sip and set it right back down. That casual sip was the ultimate punctuation mark. The sip explicitly said, "I am finished. I am completely unstressed, and the hydration that you watched me completely ignore for an hour is still sitting right here." AOC finally responded. Her response was the longest rant in the entire series, 3 minutes and 44 seconds. It was also incredibly energetic. The debate format allowed a level of physical energy that formal hearing rooms severely suppressed. She moved, she gestured, she pointed. She unleashed the full range of the physical vocabulary that 5 previous hearings had brutally trained out of her, and that this debate stage suddenly liberated. She blasted Shapiro as a professional debater, not a professional law writer. She hammered home that the ability to talk at warp speed is absolutely not the ability to govern a nation. She bragged that she had aggressively moved the national conversation on climate change, on health care, and on inequality more than any other member of Congress. She insisted that real impact cannot be measured purely in signed bills alone. She name-dropped the Overton window again. She pointed out that Ben Shapiro had never run for public office, never served the nation, and never had to cast a grueling, difficult vote. It was highly effective as raw performance. It was guaranteed to generate viral clips. It handed the progressive media machine a massive rallying point, but it contained exactly 0 specific facts in response to exactly 0 specific questions. It completely ignored the $7 trillion gap. It completely ignored the failed billionaire confiscation math. It completely ignored the binary yes or no on defunding police. It completely ignored the zero-sign bills. And it completely ignored the devastating query, do you actually believe any of this? Shapiro did not even bother to respond to her response. He had already stepped away from his podium. His hands rested calmly at his sides. His face carried the exact expression of a man who has finally had the confrontation he spent 8 years requesting and walked away with the exact hollow answer he accurately predicted. Literally everything except a real answer. The very first clip to break the internet was most famous, "Do nothing." The full, uninterrupted sentence, perfectly capturing the chaotic eruption from the live audience. The clip was exactly 9 seconds long. It was shared a staggering 44 million times within the first 24 hours. The most heavily shared clip in the entire series, across all 14 stories. The brutal phrase permanently entered the political lexicon. It entered the way legendary phrases always enter lexicons, through massive repetition, instant recognition, and the terrifying stickiness of a phrase that perfectly describes something everyone had been secretly thinking, but no one had the spine to say out loud. The second massive clip was the calculator. Shapiro's rapid-fire, brutal dismantling of the Green New Deal arithmetic, ending with, "You proposed $51 trillion and offered a cheesy movie reference." This specific clip ripped through economics communities, through hardcore policy analysis accounts, and through the highly specific ecosystem of nerds who analyzed trillion-dollar proposals using massive spreadsheets and who had been begging for someone, anyone, to force her to do the math on live camera. The brutal math had existed for 7 years. Nobody possessed the courage to do it directly to AOC's face. Shapiro did it at 200 words per minute, and that overwhelming speed made the basic math feel like a fatal verdict. The third viral clip was yes or no. The rapid-fire binary sequence hammering her on defunding police and Medicare, aggressively ending with, "Can you answer a yes or no question?" This specific clip instantly became the golden template for every single future interview with AOC. Every reporter, every moderator, every debate opponent now possessed the ultimate cheat code. Ask a binary yes or no, watch the inevitable pivot, highlight the pivot, and that exact pivot, that unbreakable, consistent inability to answer binary traps with binary facts, became the fatal diagnostic that permanently defined her public persona from that point forward. But the fourth clip, the absolute nuke that would permanently end the 2028 conversation, was, "Do you actually believe any of this?" Followed by 8 agonizing seconds of debate stage silence. The silence was totally different from every hearing silence in the series. It was standing silence, glaringly visible silence. The horrific silence of a prominent woman at a podium in front of 750 live people and 30 million viewers, who has just been asked whether she actually believes her own grand proposals and physically cannot force herself to say yes. The 2028 presidential hype train ended, not because AOC voluntarily withdrew. She absolutely did not withdraw. It ended because the clash violently revealed what the boring hearings had only hinted at and cemented it as undeniable reality. She was completely incapable of defending her own grand proposals under heavy questioning, not under Vance's quiet, analytical questioning, not under Kennedy's folksy, Southern questioning, not under Johnson's pedagogical, strict questioning, and completely collapsed under Shapiro's rapid-fire assault. The grand proposals existed purely as viral content. They absolutely did not exist as executable plans. And a presidential hopeful whose flagship blueprints cannot survive 60 minutes with an internet podcaster absolutely cannot survive a brutal primary debate against a seasoned state governor. Democratic strategists, leaking savage quotes anonymously to Politico, deployed a phrase that traveled even further than any video clip. If Shapiro can do this to her, what the hell happens when she debates Whitmer? That brutal quote became the final epitaph, not because Shapiro was a deadlier politician than Whitmer. It was because Shapiro wasn't even a politician. He was a commentator, a podcaster, a civilian with zero institutional authority, zero subpoena power, and zero committee staff. If a mere commentator could vaporize AOC's platform in 1 hour, a sitting governor armed with a real legislative record would dismantle it in 10 minutes. Shapiro granted a single exclusive interview the following morning on his own podcast. I waited 8 years, he stated. She smeared it as catcalling. I framed it as a debate. Last night, the entire country found out which one it truly was. He paused. Look, she's highly talented. She's incredibly charismatic. She is undeniably the best communicator in Congress. But aggressive communication completely void of substance is just performance. And performance completely void of signed legislation is just internet content. And internet content completely void of real-world results is just a corporate brand. And a shiny brand is not a presidency. I begged her to hand over one specific fact to one specific question across 8 long years and one grueling debate. I never received a single one. Meanwhile, all the way in Middletown, Ohio, Crystal Atkins sat chilling in the break room of the Brighter Days Recovery Center. The television screen was glowing. Donna was hanging out there too. For a rare change, the coffee pot was actually still warm. The clash had ended way earlier than those exhausting hearings. This broadcast felt completely alien compared to all of them. It's crazy, Crystal mumbled. How? No fancy hearing room, no wooden gavel, no massive committee, no thick folders, no cheat sheet binders, literally just 2 humans standing upright. She stared blankly at the screen. The broadcast replay was looping. Those excruciating 8 seconds of dead air. AOC planted at the podium, completely speechless. Look at all those hearings. Vance, Kennedy, Johnson, Trump. They all stripped things away from her, Crystal analyzed. Vance obliterated the money. Kennedy obliterated the vocabulary. Johnson obliterated the credibility. Trump weaponized the silence. But every single one of them possessed massive power. They perched on elevated thrones. They commanded massive committees. They hurled legal subpoenas. They wielded the crushing weight of the entire federal government right behind them. Shapiro walked in with absolutely nothing. No elevated dais, no committee, no subpoena. He was armed with a basic calculator and a microphone. And he inflicted more catastrophic damage in 60 minutes than all of those politicians combined managed to inflict using the entire heavy machinery of Congress. She took a breath. You know exactly why? Because in every single hearing, she could easily hunker down and sit in silence. 12 seconds, 15 seconds. The silence was her ultimate shield. Inside a fancy hearing room, keeping your mouth shut projects massive dignity. On a combat debate stage, keeping your mouth shut projects exactly what it truly is, totally lacking a factual answer. 8 agonizing seconds, standing wide open in front of 750 strangers. No lawyer to hide behind. No cheat notes, no I yield my time escape hatch. Just a wooden podium and a brutal question she physically couldn't resolve. Do you actually believe any of this? Crystal slowly shook her head. That is the ultimate question that literally nobody in Congress possessed the spine to ask her. Not Vance, he just attacked the finances. Not Kennedy, he just attacked the slogans. Not Johnson, he just attacked the metrics. Not Trump, he just attacked the hypocrisy. They all purely attacked her actions. Shapiro zeroed in and attacked her core belief, and she completely choked because holding true belief requires an executable plan, and a real plan requires hard math. And her math is a total fantasy. And she has been fully aware that the math is a total fantasy for 8 long years, yet she aggressively pitched it anyway. Because the proposal was never actually built to succeed in the real world. It was purely built to dominate the trending algorithms. She rinsed her mug, boiling water, skipped the soap, slammed it upside down onto the drying rack. 14 different stories in this series. This is absolutely the final one I ever need to witness. because this specific angle finally buried the haunting question that every other story failed to close. Does she know? Does she know the math is a joke? Does she know the policies are a complete illusion? Does she know her entire empire is propped up by blueprints that instantly disintegrate the second they meet a basic calculator? Shapiro finally asked it, and that 8-second void, standing wide open, painfully visible, absolutely undeniable, screamed to the entire world, yes, she knows. She wandered back over to the crew. The broadcast droned on to the empty break room walls. Do you actually believe any of this, Congresswoman? 8 agonizing ticks of standing, visible silence. The screen abruptly snapped to a commercial break. If you made it all the way to this point, you just witnessed the ultimate debate that required a grueling 8 years to finally happen. And you discovered exactly why it stalled for 8 long years. Because the politician who smeared a debate challenge as toxic catcalling knew perfectly well back in 2018 what the rest of the country just figured out in 2026, that her grand proposals absolutely cannot survive 60 minutes of intense scrutiny. Not from a high-ranking senator, not from a powerful speaker, not from a sitting president, from an internet podcaster holding a calculator. Smash that like button right now if Ben Shapiro successfully reminded you that the fastest, loudest talker in the room only walks away victorious if they actually brought the math to back it up. Subscribe for more deep dives where cold, hard calculators brutally destroy hollow internet content and basic yes or no inquiries obliterate slippery Overton window excuses. Share this video with literally anyone who has ever listened to a politician casually scream $93 trillion and wondered, did anybody actually check the numbers on that? Drop a comment down below right now. What was your absolute favorite savage moment? Was it the brutal catcalling trap? Was it the 7 trillion? Where is it? Nuke? Was it the relentless binary yes or no loop? Was it, can you answer a yes or no question? Was it the legendary most famous do-nothing insult? Was it that arrogant ice-cold water sip? Or was it the excruciating 8 seconds of standing silence right after, do you actually believe any of this? Turn on your notifications immediately, because this specific debate might be over, but the viral clips are going to live on the internet forever. The most famous do-nothing tag is dominating the trends. Do you actually believe it? Is the exact trap that every single 2028 debate moderator is going to trigger. And somewhere out there, kicking back in a podcast studio, a guy who killed 8 years waiting for this exact moment is sipping his coffee and thinking, it was completely worth the wait. She smeared it as catcalling. He framed it as a debate. 8 long years later, the entire world knows exactly which one it truly was. $93 trillion. 0 real funding. 0 signed bills. 0 concrete answers. 8 agonizing seconds of pure void. That is absolutely not catcalling. That is just a basic calculator doing its job. God bless the college freshmen Shapiro sparred with for a decade who were brainwashed into believing they were being bullied when they were literally just being questioned on their logic. God bless the 571,000 grassroots donors throwing away $16.81 a month because they genuinely buy into grand blueprints that instantly melt under the weight of a calculator. And God bless every single hardworking American who has ever aggressively demanded from a politician, how exactly do you pay for it? And received a cheesy movie quote as an answer. Do you actually believe any of this? 8 seconds. That silence is the only answer you will ever need.